There's a question very few men ask themselves until it's too late. Not, do I still believe in love? Not, can I find happiness again? But something far more uncomfortable. Am I trying to build a future? Or am I trying to repair a loneliness that has been quietly growing inside me for years? If that question hit a nerve, stay with me. And if you appreciate conversations that don't treat you like a child, but like a man capable of facing difficult truths, consider subscribing. Not because I need another number on a screen, but because some conversations deserve to continue beyond a single evening. Now, I want you to picture a man sitting alone in his living room. Maybe he's 65, maybe 70, maybe older. The house is quieter than it used to be. The children have their own lives. The phone rings less often. The evenings feel longer. And somewhere inside him, a thought begins to appear. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a whisper. Maybe I should get married again. At first, it feels reasonable, human even. After all, companionship matters, love matters, connection matters. No psychologist worth listening to would tell you otherwise. But here's what I've noticed after years of listening to men tell me their stories. Many older men don't actually want marriage. They want relief. Relief from silence, relief from routine, relief from the feeling that life has become predictable. And those are very different things. Because loneliness has a strange way of disguising itself as certainty. When you're lonely long enough, almost any emotional possibility begins to look like destiny. A smile feels deeper, attention feels rarer, affection feels more meaningful than it really is. And suddenly a man who spent decades making careful decisions starts making emotional ones. Not because he's foolish, because he's human. I remember speaking with a retired gentleman years ago. He had been widowed. His wife had been his partner for more than 40 years. For nearly 3 years after her passing, he focused on surviving. Then one day he met someone. She was kind, warm, intelligent. He felt alive again. His eyes literally changed when he talked about her. And everyone around him celebrated. Finally, he's happy again. But several months later, he told me something that stayed with me. He said, I don't know if I love her, or if I love the feeling of not being alone. That sentence carries more wisdom than most relationship books, because before a senior man considers remarriage, he must answer one difficult question. Am I moving towards someone, or am I running away from something? The answer changes everything. And that's where the first reason begins. The first reason some senior men should be extremely careful about remarrying has nothing to do with money, nothing to do with age, nothing to do with romance. It has to do with grief. The grief many men never fully process. Because what most people don't understand is that grief doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like urgency. Sometimes it looks like needing to fill a space as quickly as possible. Sometimes it looks like convincing yourself you've healed simply because you've stopped crying. But healing and replacing are not the same thing. And when a man confuses those two things, he may walk into a new marriage carrying emotions that were never truly unpacked. Not because he's weak, because nobody taught him how. The problem is that unresolved grief has a way of showing up later, often when the honeymoon feeling fades, often when everyday life returns, often when comparisons begin. And when that happens, both people end up carrying a burden neither of them created. That's why the first thing I want every senior man watching tonight to understand is this. A new relationship cannot successfully compete with a wound that was never allowed to heal. And sometimes the most courageous thing a man can do is sit quietly with his loneliness long enough to understand what it's really trying to tell him. The second reason some senior men should think very carefully before remarrying is uncomfortable because it challenges something most people automatically assume. The belief that companionship and compatibility are the same thing. They're not even close. In fact, one of the saddest conversations I've ever had was with a man in his 70s who looked genuinely confused when he said, "We enjoy each other's company, so why does everything feel so difficult?" He wasn't describing constant arguments. There was no betrayal, no major crisis, just a growing sense that something wasn't fitting together, like two puzzle pieces forced into the same space because they happened to be lying on the same table. You see, when we're younger, life is still under construction. People are building careers, raising children, creating routines, discovering who they are. There's flexibility, movement, room for adjustment. But later in life, something changes. Your habits aren't just habits anymore. They're your lifestyle. Your mornings matter, your privacy matters, your routines matter. The chair you sit in every evening matters. The way you spend your money matters. The amount of silence you need matters. And what many senior men underestimate is how difficult it can be to merge two fully established lives. Not impossible, just far more complex than people admit. Because love can bring two people together, but daily life is what determines whether they stay together peacefully. I've watched men fall deeply for someone, only to discover that the relationship felt very different once everyday reality arrived. One preferred constant social activity, the other cherished quiet evenings. One loved spontaneous travel, the other wanted predictability. One saw retirement as freedom, the other saw it as stability. Neither person was wrong, neither person was bad. They simply spent decades becoming different people. And here's the part nobody likes talking about. When you're younger, you often adapt because the future feels endless. When you're older, you become more protective of the life you've carefully built. That's not selfish, that's wisdom. You've earned your routines, you've earned your peace. You've spent years learning what works for you, which means every compromise feels larger than it once did. A man who happily adjusted his entire life at 30 may find himself exhausted by constant adjustment at 70. And that's okay. What concerns me is when men feel guilty for admitting it. Society often sends a strange message. It tells older men that if they find someone nice, they should automatically pursue marriage, as though marriage is the final proof that a relationship is real. But is it? Sometimes companionship without remarriage creates more happiness than remarriage itself. Sometimes two people can care deeply about each other while preserving the independence they've spent decades creating. That idea makes some people uncomfortable, yet I've seen it work beautifully. Because the goal isn't marriage. The goal is fulfillment. The goal is peace. The goal is emotional connection. And those things don't always require legal or financial merging. What I've noticed is that many senior men are searching for warmth, conversation, shared experiences, someone who understands them. But somewhere along the way, they start believing marriage is the only path to those things. It isn't. And before any man remarries, he owes himself complete honesty. Am I pursuing this because it truly fits the life I want now? Or because I'm following a script that no longer matches who I've become? Because there's a profound difference between finding someone who complements your life and finding someone who unintentionally requires you to abandon the life you've spent decades building. The older you get, the more valuable peace becomes, and peace is not something a wise man should surrender casually. The third reason some senior men should be cautious about remarriage is one that almost nobody discusses openly, because talking about it feels uncomfortable, sometimes even selfish. But avoiding it doesn't make it disappear. I'm talking about independence, not the kind people brag about, not the "I don't need anyone" attitude. I'm talking about something much quieter, the freedom to live according to your own rhythm, the freedom you've spent an entire lifetime earning. Many men don't fully appreciate that freedom until they risk losing it, and strangely enough, it often happens after they've finally achieved it. Think about it. For decades, most men carry responsibilities everywhere they go. Work responsibilities, family responsibilities, financial responsibilities, social expectations, people needing things from them constantly. For years, their lives are structured around obligations. Then retirement arrives. The children grow up. The daily pressures begin to fade. And for the first time in a very long time, there's space. Real space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to wake up without rushing, space to spend a Tuesday however they choose. At first, that freedom feels unfamiliar, almost strange. But eventually something happens. A man starts remembering who he is outside of responsibility. He discovers old interests, new hobbies, long walks, books, travel, quiet mornings, maybe even parts of himself he hadn't met in decades. And then love enters the picture. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But what worries me is when men underestimate how much their daily lives may change afterward. Because every serious partnership involves responsibility. Every close relationship involves compromise. Every shared life involves negotiation. That's not a criticism of marriage, it's simply reality. I once spoke with a gentleman who had been happily single for nearly 10 years after losing his wife. One afternoon he smiled and said something that made me pause. He said, "I finally learned how to enjoy my own company." Such a simple sentence, yet so many people never reach that point. You see, when a man enjoys his own company, his decisions become different. He's no longer choosing relationships from emotional hunger. He's choosing from emotional clarity. That's a huge difference. Because emotional hunger says, "I need someone." Clarity says, "I enjoy someone." One creates dependency, the other creates choice. And choice leads to healthier decisions. The challenge is that loneliness and independence often coexist. A man can genuinely miss companionship while also loving the freedom he's built. Those feelings can exist together, yet many men treat them like enemies, as if they must choose one or the other. But perhaps the real question isn't, do I want a relationship? Perhaps it's, am I willing to trade certain freedoms for the relationship I want? Because every trade has a cost. More importantly, every trade should be conscious, not emotional, not impulsive, conscious. The older I get, the more I notice something fascinating. People often assume wisdom means knowing what to pursue, but wisdom is equally about knowing what not to give away. Your peace, your routines, your emotional stability, your independence. Those things have value, enormous value. And if a senior man chooses remarriage, it should be because the relationship genuinely enriches those things. Not because he's afraid of being alone, because fear has a terrible track record when it comes to life-changing decisions. Fear makes urgency feel like certainty. It makes temporary emotions feel permanent. And it convinces good men to surrender things they later realize they deeply needed. The happiest older men I've met all share one quality. They don't view relationships as a rescue mission. They view them as an addition to an already meaningful life. And that distinction may be one of the most important differences of all. The fourth reason some senior men should pause before remarrying has less to do with romance and more to do with something that quietly shapes almost every relationship later in life. Expectations. Not the expectations we talk about, the hidden ones, the unspoken ones, the expectations that sit silently in the background influencing everything. Because here's something I've learned after listening to countless relationship stories. Most disappointment doesn't come from bad intentions. It comes from assumptions. Two people enter a relationship believing they're building the same future, only to discover months or years later that they were imagining completely different lives. And when you're older, those differences often become sharper, more significant, harder to ignore. A man may imagine companionship, a woman may imagine complete partnership. One person may picture shared adventures, the other may picture emotional security. One may want closeness with healthy independence. The other may hope for constant togetherness. Neither person is wrong, but when those expectations remain unspoken, confusion slowly replaces connection. I remember a conversation with a retired engineer, a thoughtful man, practical, measured. He told me he was considering marriage again after several years in a committed relationship. Everything seemed good from the outside. They cared for each other deeply, rarely argued, shared many interests. Yet something felt unsettled. Eventually, he discovered why. He had envisioned marriage as companionship. She had envisioned marriage as complete integration. Different finances, different living arrangements, different family expectations, different levels of involvement in each other's daily lives. Neither had clearly communicated those expectations. They simply assumed. And assumptions can quietly become relationship landmines, especially later in life. Because by this stage, most people carry decades of experiences, decades of disappointments, decades of lessons, decades of hopes they haven't fully let go of. Every relationship enters the room carrying invisible luggage. Past marriages, past losses, past regrets, past successes. The challenge isn't having that luggage. Everyone does. The challenge is understanding what's inside it, before making permanent decisions. Because sometimes people aren't falling in love with who is actually standing in front of them. They're falling in love with what they hope that person will provide. Comfort, security, belonging, meaning, a second chance. And those are beautiful desires. But they're dangerous foundations for marriage if they're never examined. One of the most powerful questions a senior man can ask himself is this: what am I expecting this marriage to solve? Sit with that question for a moment. Really sit with it. Because if the answer includes loneliness, boredom, fear of aging, regret, or uncertainty, then the issue may not be marriage at all. The issue may be something deeper asking for attention, something that deserves understanding before commitment. I've seen men enter marriages hoping to fix emotional discomfort, only to discover that the discomfort followed them. Because relationships can support healing, but they cannot replace it. And perhaps that's the quiet truth nobody says enough. A healthy relationship adds joy to your life. It doesn't carry the responsibility of creating your entire happiness. That's too heavy for any human being, too heavy for any marriage. As the years pass, clarity becomes more valuable than excitement. Because excitement fades, reality doesn't. And the men who navigate later life relationships most successfully are rarely the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones willing to ask difficult questions before making permanent promises. Questions that protect not only their future, but the future of the person they care about as well. Because real love isn't rushing towards certainty. Sometimes real love is slowing down long enough to see clearly. Now we arrive at a reason that many men instinctively avoid discussing. Not because it isn't important, because it feels uncomfortable. And if you've made it this far, I want you to listen carefully. Because this reason isn't about romance. It's not about attraction. It's not even about compatibility. It's about time. The older we become, the more aware we are that time is no longer an abstract concept. When we're young, we spend time as if there's an endless supply. We postpone dreams, delay conversations, assume there will always be another year, another decade, another opportunity. But eventually something changes. A man begins to understand that time is not measured by calendars, it's measured by moments. And suddenly the question isn't, how many years do I have left? The question becomes, how do I want to spend the years I have? That's a very different question, a much deeper one. I've noticed that many senior men reach a stage where external success matters less. Status matters less. Approval matters less. What becomes precious is meaning, peace, purpose, authenticity, the ability to wake up each morning and feel that your life still belongs to you. And here's where remarriage deserves careful consideration, because every major commitment shapes how you spend your remaining years. Every commitment creates responsibilities, obligations, expectations, adjustments. Again, none of these things are inherently bad, but they should be chosen intentionally, not automatically. I once met a man in his late 70s who told me something remarkable. He had spent years assuming he needed another marriage to feel complete. Years. Then one day he stopped searching. Not out of bitterness, not out of defeat. He simply became curious about his own life. He started traveling, volunteering, reading, meeting people, taking classes, reconnecting with friends. And after several years, he laughed and said, "For the first time, I stopped asking who was missing from my life and started asking what was missing from my life." That subtle shift changed everything. Because often the hunger we attribute to relationships is actually a hunger for engagement, for purpose, for growth, for meaning, for feeling alive again. And those needs can sometimes be addressed in ways that have nothing to do with marriage. The danger comes when a man assumes one person is responsible for bringing life back into his world. That's an enormous burden to place on anyone. No spouse can become your purpose. No relationship can become your identity. No marriage can replace a meaningful relationship with yourself. And the older we get, the more important that truth becomes. Because fulfillment becomes less about acquiring things and more about understanding ourselves. Less about proving something, more about experiencing something. Less about following expectations, more about living honestly. So before any senior man remarries, I believe he should ask himself one final question. If no one were judging me, if society had no opinion, if nobody expected anything from me, would I still choose this path? The answer to that question reveals more than most people realize, because sometimes the life that looks ordinary from the outside is actually deeply fulfilling on the inside. And sometimes the life that looks ideal from the outside quietly costs more than it's giving. The wisest decisions often come when a man stops asking what he should do and starts asking what genuinely aligns with the person he has become. And now we come to the fifth reason, the one I asked you to pay attention to. Not because it's dramatic, not because it's shocking, but because it sits underneath every other reason we've discussed. It's the reason that quietly determines whether a decision brings peace or regret. The fifth reason some senior men should never remarry is this: they are hoping marriage will save them from themselves. I know that's a difficult sentence to hear, but stay with me, because I'm not talking about weakness, I'm talking about something profoundly human. There comes a point in many men's lives when the distractions begin to fade. The career no longer defines them, the children no longer need them in the same way. The constant busyness that once filled every hour begins to disappear. And what remains? Themselves, their thoughts, their memories, their regrets, their unanswered questions, their fears about aging, their fears about purpose, their fears about being forgotten. For some men, that's an uncomfortable meeting, because they've spent decades taking care of everyone else while rarely stopping to understand their own inner world. Then one day they find themselves alone in a quiet room, and the silence feels louder than expected. That's often the moment when the desire for remarriage becomes strongest. But sometimes the longing isn't really for a wife, it's for escape. Escape from uncertainty, escape from loneliness, escape from confronting parts of themselves they've avoided for years. And here's what I want every man watching tonight to know. No relationship can permanently protect you from that encounter. Eventually, every human being must sit with themselves. Every human being must make peace with their own story. Every human being must learn how to feel whole without depending entirely on another person to provide that feeling. Because when a man reaches that place, something beautiful happens. His relationships change. He stops chasing rescue. He stops chasing validation. He stops looking for someone to fill an emotional vacancy. Instead, he begins connecting from a place of abundance. And relationships built from abundance feel very different from relationships built from need. Need says, "Please don't leave me alone." Abundance says, "I enjoy sharing my life with you." Need creates pressure. Abundance creates freedom. Need clings. Abundance chooses. And the difference is enormous. Now, please don't misunderstand me. This video is not an argument against love. It's not an argument against remarriage. Some senior men remarry and build wonderful, meaningful, deeply fulfilling relationships. I've seen it happen. The issue isn't remarriage itself. The issue is the reason behind it. That's what matters. Because a wise man doesn't ask only, "Can I get married again?" He asks, "Why do I want to get married again?" That question requires courage. Real courage. The kind of courage that doesn't impress strangers but transforms lives. So tonight, before you make assumptions about what your future should look like, I want you to consider something. Perhaps happiness isn't hiding inside another ceremony. Perhaps peace isn't waiting inside another legal commitment. Perhaps the answer isn't finding someone to complete your life. Perhaps it's building a life that already feels complete, and then deciding whether someone genuinely enhances it. That's a very different approach, a calmer one, a wiser one. And maybe that's the greatest advantage of growing older. Not that you stop making mistakes, but that you finally learn the difference between wanting something and truly needing it. If this conversation gave words to thoughts you've never fully spoken out loud, let me know in the comments. I'd genuinely like to hear your perspective. And if these deeper conversations about relationships, psychology, aging, and self-understanding resonate with you, subscribe and stay with me. There are some truths that only become visible when we're willing to look at them honestly. And sometimes, one honest conversation can change the way a man sees the rest of his life.